Greetings, my name is Gordon Levine. I'm the Continuum of Care Manager for the Louisiana Balance of State Continuum of Care, Louisiana's largest coalition to end homelessness. I work for the Louisiana Housing Corporation in its Department of Housing and Homeless Services, and I'm excited to share with you today the ways in which the Continuum of Care, or CoC program, impact the Louisiana Housing Corporation and Louisiana's homeless population. So what is the CoC program? It is, among other things, the largest competitive grant in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and in the entire federal government. It funds $2.2 billion annually in housing and supportive services for people experiencing homelessness and for people who are at risk of homelessness. It's also the single largest funding source dedicated to homelessness in Louisiana. In fact, in 2019, it funded nearly $55 million, which is more than twice what all of the other homeless dedicated sources spent combined. In exchange for CoC program funding, HUD requires organizations and the communities that they belong to work together to prevent and end homelessness. That coalition of stakeholders, communities, organizations, faith-based groups, service providers, cities, police departments, and so on, is called a continuum of care, or a CoC. So what does the CoC program actually fund? Fundamentally, three types of things. The first one is rapid rehousing, or RRH, which is a project model that funds short to medium term scattered site rental vouchers. It runs for between 3 to 24 months with an average of 6 months, and it provides housing, case management, and a broader range of supportive services, and it ranges from outpatient physical and mental health to education, legal services, anything really that would be required to remove a person's barrier to achieving permanent and self-sufficient housing. Rapid rehousing serves people who are experiencing literal homelessness, which means that they're living on the streets, in a shelter, or in another place that's not meant for human habitation, like a park or in their car, and people who are fleeing domestic violence. And fleeing has a relatively broad definition, as does domestic violence, and it includes dating violence, sexual violence, and stalking. It also funds permanent supportive housing, or PSH, which is unlimited duration, single site or scattered site, rental assistance, case management, and supportive services. And to clarify between single site and scattered site is what you would think of as a traditional rental voucher. You can take it to any unit and rent it on the open market. Single site is, think of like an apartment building that is dedicated to people experiencing homelessness, or a residential facility, and it runs the gamut between those two. PSH is exclusively for people who are experiencing chronic homelessness, and the definition of chronic homelessness is much more narrow than literal homelessness. It requires you to have spent 12 months experiencing homelessness, either over the last 12 months, so you need to have spent the last 12 months consecutively experiencing homelessness, or you need to have spent 12 months over the last 3 years experiencing homelessness over 4 separate episodes. And you need to have a severe and persistent physical or mental disability as diagnosed by someone who is licensed to diagnose that. Finally, a very small portion of CoC program funds go to planning costs and to fund our homeless management information system, which is our statewide database of information about people experiencing homelessness. Planning costs and, to an extent, HMIS costs can only be requested by lead agencies for each continuum of care, and they fundamentally fund all of those things that go into making a community and a coalition work. So everything from hosting meetings, developing policies and procedures, applying for funding, determining who locally receives that funding, maintaining and reporting on data, advocating around homeless issues to local stakeholders, educating those stakeholders about homelessness in the area and homelessness generally, and so on. So in Louisiana, there are 7 CoCs, these community coalitions to end homelessness. CoCs generally speaking, can be as small as one parish or one county everywhere else, and they can be as large as an entire state. In Louisiana, we're divided up into 5 smaller regional COCs that receive about $1 million annually. And then we have these 2 very large COCs. One of them is the Jefferson Orleans COC, which obviously covers Jefferson and Orleans parishes. It's one of the largest COCs in the United States. I think it's the 29th largest out of 400. It receives about $22 million annually. And then the balance of state continuum of care, which again I manage, covers approximately half the state. It includes the cities of Baton Rouge, Lake Charles, and Houma. It includes their parishes, and it includes all of the parishes surrounding them, and Natchitoches, Sabine, Plaquemines, and St. Bernard. And we receive about $19 million annually. The Housing Corporation fits in because LHC is the collaborative applicant or lead agency for the balance of state continuum of care, which means we get access to those planning costs and those HMIS costs that we talked about a minute ago, and we use those to fund, among other things, mostly staffing costs. Me, my staff, some of our directors' salaries, and a variety of training and educational costs that go into ensuring all of our case managers and organizations are well equipped to do their jobs. So if you want to see a visual breakdown of what COCs in Louisiana look like, this is a map. Actually, it comes from the Balance of States website, and it's actually a live map. Anyone can click on any parish and receive information about how to access services in their area. But Jefferson Orleans, you can see, is the pink 2 parishes in the bottom right-hand corner, and then everything that's in any shade of green is the Louisiana Balance of State Continuum of Care, which is what LHC is responsible for. And then all of the other colors are the other regional COCs. So there's another visualization of funding for last funding year here in Louisiana. As you can see, the Balance of State and the Jefferson Orleans COC make up overwhelmingly the majority of COC funding in Louisiana. And another visualization. So I always think it's interesting to compare different communities and see kind of what everyone is getting. So the Balance of State receives the 30th largest award out of 400 COCs nationally and overseas. So we're that green dot right up there up top. New Orleans is the slightly darker green dot, or green square rather, to the left of that. And then 300 of the 400 COCs in the country are represented by that large orange square in the bottom right-hand corner. So, Louisiana receives quite a lot of money through the CoC program, even compared to it being really a very large program. So LHC really has 2 separate roles in the CoC program. One of them is as a fund recipient and administrator. So in other words, we run projects that serve people experiencing homelessness. And one of them is as this lead agency or collaborative applicant role. So we manage the coalition. Both of those roles are played by the Department of Housing and Homeless Services. As a project recipient or fund administrator, what we do really is we apply for and receive money directly from HUD. We pass that money directly to subrecipients, so service providers, who actually implement the housing and case management, and then we monitor those subrecipients and spending and their compliance, and then report on that annually to HUD. So in other words, we're a funding pass-through. We monitor progress, we assist with applications, we receive the money, we report back to HUD, we disperse funds, but in almost all circumstances, LHC does not serve as a direct service provider, but rather as a pass-through, a monitor, and a subject matter expert. As a project recipient, LHC received approximately $14 million in this last funding round. Notably, the LAPSH, or the Louisiana Permanent Supportive Housing Initiative project, which receives $12 million of that $14 million, is a very large legacy project that some of you may know was awarded in the wake of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. It is the largest homeless dedicated housing project in Louisiana, and it provides PSH statewide, unlike any of our other balance of state projects, the majority of which is spent in New Orleans. That said, it also covers Lafayette and Baton Rouge and Lake Charles and a little bit of North Lake, and so those PSH activities are really all over the state. As a collaborative applicant, we have a very different role, and that's really the role that me and my staff play. Fundamentally, when you get right down to it, we submit the collaborative application for the balance of state to HUD, which includes LHC funding, but also all of our other organizations' funding requests. It's like 35 projects. We monitor, we provide technical assistance, we provide expert knowledge to these projects. We conduct annual activities like the point in time count, which is our annual census of people experiencing homelessness, which is where all of our best data about who's experiencing homelessness comes from. And we report on all of those activities to HUD and to our stakeholders like the governor and our local government partners and our service providers. This role is unusual. I cannot emphasize enough how it doesn't resemble anything else that any other funding source I've ever been a part of does. And I've worked under pretty much every funding source available through HUD to do any kind of housing development, housing construction, or supportive housing. CoC staff are weird. We don't do services. We're subject matter experts. We make policy, and we advocate. It's best to think of us as a sort of in-house technical assistance provider or consultant funded by HUD to support our local service providers who are doing the actual on-the-ground work to do the best work they possibly can. Combined, the CoC Planning Grant and the HMIS Grant are total about $1 million, but they can only be spent on these coalition building, assessment, and reporting activities. Mostly that means staff salaries. So, accessing services. HUD requires every CoC to operate what's called a coordinated entry system. And the idea behind a coordinated entry system is HUD wants, and we want, because it's a good idea, a system whereby a person experiencing homelessness can go to any place that serves people experiencing homelessness and say, hi, here's my deal, here's what I need, and they'll receive access to all of the services in their area, either right there, or they'll be directed to a central access point to access those services. Every access point in Louisiana is listed on the Balance of States website at www.laboscoc.org under the Housing and Services link. We maintain that service for everybody and for the Housing Corporation because it needs to be somewhere, and it's us. A person can go to that website and navigate by clicking on their parish, by selecting their parish by name, or by searching by city. In many areas of the state, you can call 211. It's not everywhere, but it's many of those areas. And to give you an idea, in Baton Rouge, which is, of course, the largest service provider concentration and the largest homeless population concentration in the balance of state, simply by virtue of being the largest urban area that we have in the largest population area, our main access points are the one-stop center for the homeless, which you can call at 255-225-388-5800. St. Vincent de Paul at 225-383-7343. One final note about homelessness in Louisiana. Big picture, between 2011 and 2019, homelessness in Louisiana dropped almost 70%. However, almost no gains were made between 2017 and 2019, and homelessness actually increased between 2019 and 2020, which we count in January, so it was before the COVID-19 pandemic. Why? No one really knows, but outside factors are a part of it. Employment availability, a lack of affordable housing, and funding availability are a big piece of it. And when we say funding availability, the CoC program only grows a little bit every year. Limited new funding means limited new vouchers. And one of the quirks of CoC program funding is the majority of it goes toward PSH. And since PSH is of unlimited duration, it turns over very slowly. And so if new funding availability isn't keeping pace with PSH bed turnover, ultimately the availability of resources slows. You make a lot of progress very quickly, and then your progress slows down. During COVID-19, CoC staff have contributed significantly to placing nearly 1,500 people in non-congregate shelter, so hotels, who would otherwise have been deeply vulnerable to COVID-19. And as we speak, statewide, our non-congregate shelters are transitioning people to permanent housing. In fact, in Baton Rouge, not quite the majority, but almost the majority of everyone in non-congregate shelter have been referred out or transitioned out to permanent housing. We expect to be the majority this week, and we expect to be winding down our non-congregate shelters extremely rapidly. That's all I have today. I am open to any questions. You can contact me at 225-242-1388 at my desk number, or email me at glevine@lhc.la.gov. I'm always happy to answer questions about the Continuum of Care program, homelessness in Baton Rouge, and the balance of state and in Louisiana. Thank you very much. Stay